Before the actual class of the Surangama Sutra, I would like to address a few things. Now, first of all, the relevant management team all got together and we discussed on the topic of charity. In the future, if we were to engage in charity, we have decided to put 1% of the collective alms for chanting will be gathered together to help the ones who suffer from illness and calamity outside of Langar. And I propose that the money should take about 1% to contribute to the future construction and mending of the infrastructures in Langar. And this year, if the collective decision is that take another 1% of that to engage in charity outside of Langar, I wonder if people will, if the sanghas will receive enough offerings to sustain their life, to sustain, to be living here. So that is why we decided to have a vote. And out of over 20 people, I was the only one who voted not to support that idea. The rest of them all decided to use that 1% of the alm to support various kinds of other means. And they decided that though it may impact some people's living situation, it is necessary for a Mahayana practitioner to help others. So 1% of the alms that we gathered together will be distributed to the charity of helping others. Well, if you have a different idea, if you do not support that decision as voted, then you can then raise that issue to the management team, and maybe we can see what to do. But I doubt if there are people who would oppose that idea. And I think the sum will be calculated. Well, for those of you who wish to contribute to the various causes, those of you who do not go to the chanting sessions to receive alms, and if you wish to contribute to the causes, make connections to the causes, then you can also make contribution too. But I think it's necessary to put maybe 1 RMB into the project and put various kinds of numbers of that 1 RMB everywhere. It's very difficult to calculate as well, so please be aware of that as well. Now, the next thing is that after a few rounds of discussions, I was asked about offering food to the monastics after noontime. You should not offer food to the monastics after noon, because for monastics, it is that we keep the vow of not having food after noontime, especially for people who observe that precepts. Not everyone over here would observe that precepts, but still it is necessary for the lay practitioners or people in general to make offering to the monastics after noontime. Every bite of that food after noontime, people who take that food, also people who offer that food, also would accumulate a negative negative karma, whatever food it may be, cookie, corn, and so on. Yesterday, in the shop, people prepared some potatoes and corn. It would be the best to make that offering in the morning. If you really couldn't have that time, it is still the best not to offer that in the afternoon. In the past, when I used to herd the yaks, I would keep the food wrapped and put it under the sun to warm them up in the winter. So I think you can also then heat the food up after receiving it in the morning. Afternoon time, it is the best not to make offering to the monastics with food, that is. So I'd like to make sure that everyone understands it. The next thing is that recently, many Sangha members asked me to see them, and many of the monastics invited me to have meal or to grant blessings at different departments. I've asked about many departments, but recently I'm really busy and I don't have that much time to do that. I have lots of things to engage in the past few months. I didn't have to go to different places, so I've saved some time. But recently, there are various kinds of projects that need my involvement. Also, the authorities asked me to have meetings. On top of that, I have my own translation projects. I would get up at 5 and then started to translate at that time and all the way till 11. If I get up at 5 a.m., I still couldn't finish my projects. On top of that, I couldn't finish my chanting. I would turn off my phone, close my door, and not engage in various chores. Even by doing all of those, I am still quite busy with my translations and still cannot finish my own chanting, daily chants. That is why I hope that you don't get upset if I don't have enough time to get together with you, to chat with you, to have meals with you, and so on. Well, I've already addressed many things in class. The Khenpos and Khenmos who are in the management role of that year can resolve various issues. I am not capable of being involved in all of the small issues in different departments unless I manifest into I can manifest into numerous manifestations in Nirmanakayas and then engage in those issues, which I cannot do that right now. And then the pandemic. In terms of pandemic, we have to comply with the Serta and Gazi prefecture and what the state is doing. We cannot be too strict nor too loose about those regulations now. The restaurants over here and cafeterias over here would have to still run as usual because, of course, life is really precious, but if we do not provide food and meals, that is not reasonable either. The Tibetans, the Chinese Sangha all pay various attention to prevent the pandemic, and nowadays people through various means would get into Larangar, maybe walk through the door, fly over the door. I don't know how they did it, but they would arrive in Larangar. So the management team are working, but the Dharma Assembly, since we're going to have a Dharma Assembly, I'm not so sure if it is going to happen yet, but it seems to be. Whatever situation you may be in, it is the best not to be in the crowds of being large crowds or to travel to larger cities. For example, if you were to go to the hospital in Chengdu and then come back with COVID and started to spread it around, that is really not good. There are people who would get into the crowds, which is not very safe at this point. The good practitioners would stay in their own retreat cabins to practice and to study, because that is your goal of staying in Larongga. And if you're studying in Larongga, it is not necessary for you to get too involved with the large crowds at this point. If you have time, I think this year what we're going to do is to simply chant more of the Vajrasattva mantra, and other than that, I don't see much of other things that you can do. Many Sangha members who returned to here recently, then you can recite and practice on your own. I think that's more appropriate. Whatever you do should have a sense of, you should know the limit of it. You shouldn't be too stressed about it nor too loose about it, just like Machi Labdren once mentioned. Not too loose nor too tight.
就是这个是怎么样？就现在他们很多人都是负责人，不自己就是去这个研究，然后呢就是一个一个的问题，这个怎么办？那个怎么办？就是很多小的问题，就这边一看的时候，我这里有17个问题，
and ask me various kinds of small questions. There are people who would come to me and ask me about 18 questions altogether, and I would say, no, I don't have time for this, and then I would walk away. I think people should try to use their own wisdom to resolve various issues. There are reasonable questions and unreasonable questions, and you should make observation of that with your own wisdom. This is something I would like to address before class. Now let us get into the study of Surangama Sutra. Well, initially, I should have taught on the Surangama Sutra yesterday, but then I was informed that there will be meetings in the at night. So I canceled the class and made that announcement to all the Dharma teachers to then pass down that announcement. And then in the afternoon, I was told that there's no more meetings, and after a day or two, we will have meetings again. So I had to practice patience with that situation. Also, I tried to call for a meeting yesterday with all the Dharma teachers, but couldn't get in touch with anybody. So I had to just simply take the day off and rest. There are times where I would get really busy and times that get really not so busy. But at either kinds of situations are situations that's perfect for practice. So we will continue with the class today instead of yesterday.
Now let us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. Today we will begin the third volume. Usually, in terms of the numbering, we would say that it's the first chapter, third chapter, or when it comes to volume, we would say volume 1, volume 2. This is the same to the Tibetan numbering system as well. And in terms of the end of chapters, it has the end sentence saying that this is the end of first chapter, but when it comes to the volumes, it doesn't really address it at the end. But sometimes it does too. Anyhow, previously we've already talked about the 5 aggregates, the 6 entrances, and the 12 ayatanas, and the 18 dhatus, all of which are empty. Previously, we've already covered on the emptiness of the 5 aggregates. Today, we will talk about the 6 entrances and 12 ayatanas and the 18 dhatus. After studying this, you should know that after studying the Surangama Sutra, I believe you will have new discoveries about your own mind, new recognitions, new insights. And then you would realize, oh, to recognize this mind, to generate insights and develop deeper understanding of this mind is not that difficult. Of course, it's not that easy either. It is not that difficult either. Once you gain some confidence in your insight of this mind, then you have the possibility to gain freedom from birth and death. There's a story of Master Fu Yin. It is said in historical record that his whole family was extremely prolific in the traditional Chinese culture. Therefore, at the 3 years of age, he could memorize the whole Confucius teachings, and then at the age of 5, he could memorize 3,000 verses. And later, he studied the 4 traditional books and the 5 sutras, which are the traditional texts in the Chinese teachings. Later, he had an opportunity to study the Surangama Sutra. After studying it, maybe because of the awakening of his previous causes and conditions and the previous karma, he developed a great fondness to this sutra. After that, with the consent from his parents, he decided to practice he decided to renounce from the worldly life and practiced as a monastic. Later, he benefited great numbers of beings through the Surangama Sutra. Later, at his time of death, he parted with a smile on his face. In fact, a great number of great masters of the past, when it was their time to part from this world, they passed away with great joy. I hope that after all of us listening to the Surangama Sutra, we can be just like Master Fu Yin, that we can also die with a smile on our face and without tears shed. But I'm not so sure if that can happen, because it seems that now many of you are still very much separated from Dharma, and your mind stream is so different than the Dharma. Can you embody the Dharma? That is the real question. Can you truly manifest Dharma? It is difficult to say. Now that we have such great numbers of Dharma that is infused with supreme blessings, if you were to take the Dharma into your heart and into your mind stream, you would definitely be able to part gracefully. But it is completely up to you. It is for you to explore, for you to practice. Nowadays, the practitioners would tell me that, oh, this Khenpo teaches really well, the other one teaches really well. His teaching carries some flavor of Dharma. You should really listen to it. And then afterwards, they would say that, oh, this one doesn't teach well, the other Khenpo doesn't teach well. So for these kinds of practitioners who sees faults in others and changes very often, this really shows that they have not embodied the Dharma yet. Do not slander the Dharma, do not
slander the ones who give the teaching of the Dharma. Of course, you have your freedom of speech, whatever you like to talk about. However, just simply contemplate that if you don't have those Khenpos and Khenmos to give you teachings on, let's say, a Surangama Sutra or the wish-fulfilling treasury and the treasury of Dharmadhatu and so on and so forth, these great numbers of teachings are not that easy to be obtained. Without these Khenpos and Khenmos, how could you receive simple teachings even? Don't even mention about such profound teachings. Because whenever I look at those disciples nowadays, I can observe their mind state, their mental state, by simply observing their actions. Sometimes they would move and wiggle around during sitting, during listening to classes. Through this kind of actions and their behavior, I would be able to see that they're not very focused. If this kind of people were to sit at the very front row and keep wiggling around, then it could create a ripple effect that would really influence the others, which then create a very negative atmosphere for listening to the Dharma. We don't really spend too much time to practice meditation together. But let it be in meditation or in the class time. If you do that all the time, if you wiggle all the time, this is not appropriate. If you're just wiggling because you're not feeling well, that is forgiven. However, if you're doing it because of your habit, because you can't control, because you're just making this as a habit, I think this is really not appropriate, because you're simply planting a negative seed in such a way. I don't really want to speak gently all the time, because gentle speech doesn't work sometimes. Therefore, sometimes I am forced to speak in such a harsh way. Another reason I am speaking so harshly today is because I've heard some rumors about people making propagation or some advertisement about the so-and-so teacher over here. I hope that none of you would make such kind of advertisement about one teacher or the other, including myself. If you have faith in me, then simply listen to class attentively. Pay attention. I don't need any of those exaggerated advertisement about me. This is really not necessary. In terms of the feedbacks I've heard about the Khenpos and Khenmos over here, some of the Khenpos and Khenmos are very skillful, and the disciples are very happy to stay in their classes and listening to their Dharma. And there are some Khenpos and Khenmos, they tend to be too sensitive about themselves, and that could create disharmony among the disciples. Therefore, you should pay attention. I often would ask others about their feedback in their classes, so that I have an understanding of the overall classes and the teaching situation. I noticed that the majority of you are doing really well, and you have a pure mind, and you're making everyone rather having a very good and comfortable environment. But some of you, you're probably still afflicted by lots of your own problems in such a way, though that you have already received a certain degrees or certain kinds of status, but your wisdom and your practice is still not at that level yet. After that being said, we need to understand that even the 5 fingers are not at the same length. So as a disciple, we should not create all kinds of bickering behind people's back, especially if you have already heard stanzas of teachings through certain teachers, though that you cannot see those teachers as the Buddha, but at least you shouldn't speak negatively behind them. And I really don't like to listen to those kinds of rumors behind the back, and to spread all of those kinds of negative information behind one another. In this way, it is not meaningful. Only those people with great wisdom would speak meaningful language, and people with a lack of wisdom would speak wrongly about others and about themselves. So I really hope that you can start to observe your own mind stream. Now let us start to study the 3rd volume, the volume 3, the 6 entrances. Over here, the
Buddha said that, moreover, Ananda, why do I say that the 6 entrances have their origin in the wonderful nature of true suchness, the treasury of thus come one? The 6 entrances are the 6 roots, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and consciousness. Those are the 6 entrances. How could one see the true nature, the Buddha nature, through the 6 entrances, which is the true nature? And the Buddha gives an example associated with each of the 6 entrances and then gives analysis in terms of the way the Buddha gives the example is, first of all, the Buddha gives an conclusion and then gives the analysis. If you were to understand the way that it's expounded, then it shouldn't be difficult to understand. Sometimes the Surangama Sutra can be a little bit difficult to understand, but for those of you who study Madhyamika and studied the Buddhist logic or the Abhidharma, then when it comes to Surangama Sutra, it is not that difficult. But if you had never studied the 5 treatises, then it would be a little bit difficult to come around to the logic. The Surangama Sutra follows a quadrilateral logic. If you don't understand this kind of logic, then it may create further confusion or doubts. There is such possibility. The Buddha said that, Ananda, although the eyes staring causes fatigue, the eye and the fatigue originate in the body. Staring gives rise to the characteristic of fatigue. Over here, the Buddha gives an example, saying that, to give you an example, if a person were to stare at one place for a long period of time, and then the eyes would get fatigued. After a long time of staring, this fatigued eye would project the characteristics of illusion. Sometimes, if we were to stare at one place for a long period of time, then our eyes would get fatigued, and then because of this fatigue, the characteristic of fatigue would be having all kinds of the things that do not exist, such as hair and other things that's floating around. And that is what we call the false convention. Whatever that appears in front of you at that time that do not exist. It is because your eye faculty started to get fatigued. Therefore, whatever you see, the preceding form or the object started to get diluted. And that kind of object is false. Therefore, it is called false convention. The eyes and fatigue, what it means is that even if your eyes do not have fatigue, do not have any problem, but at that moment of seeing the object, that is still the characteristic of fatigue. For example, one person who keep on staring and then started to see illusions, and the second person who came by and right away spot the things as they are. Both of them do not see the true characteristic. Both of them sees the characteristic of fatigue, except the first one has a fatigued eye, and the second one doesn't have fatigued eye. Or the first one has the false faculty, and the second one doesn't have the false faculty. That's only the difference. When we talk about the eye faculty, this characteristic, over here it says that the eye and fatigue originates in the body. The body here refers to the true mind, the Buddha nature, which is completely pure. Except when it manifests in front of the sentient beings like us, then there is the illusion that manifests. But the body is correct. The nature is pure. However, the manifestation manifests or being perceived in certain ways completely based on the different karma of the sentient beings. Because of the different sentient beings' karma, there are various confused forms that can be manifested. But the nature of Bodhi is true. Out of the nature of Bodhi, out of the wondrous function, then there is the manifestation of illusion. In terms of the manifestation of illusion, there can be the fatigued capacity, faculty, or it could be a functional faculty, but there's still going to be all kinds of illusions that can be manifested. Let it be the object that can be perceived by the eyes, such as a form, and then the sound be perceived by the ears, and so on and so forth. This is the common explanation by the great masters of the past as well. If we don't explain it in such a way, then it would not be easy for you to understand the later part of the content. I hope you would be able to understand this particular pattern of logic. I hope you understand that. It is to say that the false convention or the true convention that's perceived by the false faculty or the true faculty, there is really no difference, because the nature of Bodhi is pure, is the same, except that the wondrous manifestation, the play, the display is different. Therefore, the forms that's manifested could be deluded.
所以呢，就是这样的东西呢，就是实际上是跟这个菩提就是什么这个菩提灯法老相呢，就是相同的。
That's what it means by the eye and the fatigue originates in the body.
这个不明白的话呢，你就
And that's the characteristic of fatigue. If you don't understand this part, later part you'll get it more confused.
哎呦，
Now the next part,
下面呢就开始分析啊，
because a sense of seeing is stimulated in the midst of the two false, defiling objects of light and dark, defiling appearances are taken in. That is called the nature of seeing.
就是见到的东西呢，就是实际上是菩提的一种。
Earlier we said that the seeing in itself is no other than an illusory manifestation out of Bodhi. Why is that? Now let's make this analysis. Let's follow the analysis of the Buddha by looking at both of the particle of light and dark. Why light and dark? According to Gateway to Knowledge, it says that there are two aspects associated to the form, which is apparent form and the shapes. Apparent forms including the colors, and in the branches, it also includes the brightness, darkness, light, and smoke, and so on. Therefore, the bright and dark, the light and dark, they are part of the form, which can include many things that can be perceived to the eye, that can be the object to be perceived by the eyes. Whenever you look at the object, you see either dark particles or the light particles. There are the two possibilities. And then it says that a sense of seeing is stimulated in the midst of the two false. And then the defiling appearances are taking in. According to the commentary, it says that by relying on the object, it stimulates the seeing, and by relying on the faculty, it takes in the object.
What it means is that the object and the faculty of the eye has co-action, has a mutual effect on each other. The eye faculty would take in the object, the defiling object, which is from the aspect of the eye faculty, and then from the object's point of view, it then stimulates the seeing. One is based on the object from the outside. One is from the object of the outside stimulates your seeing, and the other one by relying your faculty to take in the object. These are the causal conditions. When we studied the Buddhist logic, do you remember the 4 conditions? The intention, the eye faculty, and the object. So object would be the object would be the focal condition, and then the eye faculty would be empowering, and the intention would be immediate condition. But over here it doesn't really talk about the intention. Anyhow, over here it talks about how there is the mutual effect upon each other between the faculty and the object. By seeing this way, it is called the seeing nature. But the seeing nature, according to the commentary of right lineage, says that it is not the seeing nature of seeing the Buddha nature. It is not that. It is not seeing your true nature. It is rather in a conventional way of seeing the correct object in the conventional way, that is. It is to say that if you see the red vase as a red vase, seeing the nature of seeing the vase as red is called seeing nature. It is not seeing the nature of your mind. With this kind of analysis, you will be able to understand that seeing the object, this kind of dust, is based on our faculty. Nowadays, the science would state in a more elaborate way by saying that you need to rely on your eyeball, on your retina, and then with all kinds of causes and conditions and pass through the brain and the neurons and so on, you'll be able to see it. This is quite complex, but in the Buddhist tradition, it is quite simple. It is more simple to understand. It is simply the connection between the root and the faculty and the object. With the conditions and the causes and conditions met, then one would be able to see the object. This is called the seeing. In a conventional sense, we can say that, oh, I see a mountain, I see this, and I see that. But this seeing, according to the Buddha, he said that apart from the 2 defiling objects of light and dark, this seeing is ultimately without substance. The seeing is simply delusion, is simply this defiled vision. That's it. In fact, there is no seeing, since there is no object. The object can be divided into 2 parts, the light and dark. And then in this logic, whatever you say that you see doesn't have any true substance to it. That's Ananda. You should know that seeing does not come from light or dark, nor does it come forth from the sense organs, nor is it produced from emptiness. The Buddha then told Ananda, saying that you need to observe carefully Ananda. The Buddha calls Ananda every time when he addresses Ananda. And he said that this seeing does not come from the object, nor does it from the subject, that is your faculty, the sense organ, nor does it come from the emptiness. Each of the faculties are described in such a way, or analyzed in such ways, from the object, the subject, and the emptiness in the middle. That is,
Sometimes whenever we make the observation of the mind is not inside, not outside, nor is it in the middle. It is the same meaning. Our seeing, this teaching over here is quite profound. I think you would be greatly benefited from this because we've always felt that we've seen something. We've seen someone that we like, we've seen something that we like, we've seen some environment that we like, including that we've seen our nature of mind. We've constantly trying to grasp something that is truly existent, something that has substance to be seen. Ananda also wants to have some kind of substance to be seen. And he wants to have the seeing itself. And then Buddha said that, well, yes, in the conventional sense, there is the seeing. However, it is not outside, it is not inside, it is not in the middle either. In the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, when we observe the true consciousness, it is neither outside nor inside nor in the middle. We're not even talking about the Vajrayana teachings or the Mahaati yet. We're just talking about the view from the Sutrayana's point of view. Nowadays, people would say that, oh, I really want to see you. I really want to so and so on. But people with wisdom, whenever they make such kind of observation, they would be able to know that the seeing is neither outside nor inside or in the middle. Therefore, whenever people would say that, oh, Rinpoche, I want to see you, and then whenever you say that to me, I would know that you didn't study Surangama Sutra well. Because how could you see someone? How could you see? Does the seeing come from the light and dark, or from your faculty, or from the middle? Whenever people would ask to see me, then I would say that, why don't you go and read the Surangama Sutra? If the seeing is truly having a substance, then I agree. Other than that, then you don't need to see me at all. And this is not me blubbering and bluffing around. This is the teaching that's given by the Shakyamuni Buddha himself. Other than this seeing, there is really no seeing. People in this world are constantly talking about, let me see you, let me meet you. But is there really a seeing? If you were to only understand a little bit of it, then you would be able to develop some insights. During the Buddha's time, there are also people who developed the insights, some real insights and real enlightenment or real realization. But those kind of realization is not based on any selfishness. A familiar family friend who usually came to my house and talked to my parents a long time ago, that is. And then a few years ago, he sent a message to me saying that he got blind and he couldn't see anything. And then he asked me questions saying that I can't see anything anymore. What should I do? And nowadays, I have to rely on a rope to go to the washroom. I can't really see anything anymore. And then I replied him by saying that you've already seen for so many, you had the ability to see for so many years, and you've already seen all the things that need to be seen. There's really nothing else to be seen. It would be the best for you to just chant the Avalokiteshvara mantra. And then I was told a few days ago that my suggestion to him was very beneficial, and nowadays he doesn't have any desire to see anymore. Indeed, nowadays we've already seen everything. We've already tasted everything. If we don't study the Surangama Sutra, I think the so-called seeing is really of no importance. We need to develop this kind of mindset. During last year's empowerment, the representations of the form, sound, smell, touch, and all of those objects were presented to everyone. Some of them are fragrant, some of them are rather quite foul. And then a Tibetan nun, whom upon receiving a foul-smelling object, though she felt that it doesn't smell great, and she felt that she has this aversion to it, but at the same time, she knew that it was not appropriate for her to think that way. Therefore, she kept on chanting Om Bandar Sadhu Hom to pacify and to purify her view. Therefore, we can see that in the Vajrayana teaching, there are the similar teachings in it. That is why this time I specifically brought forth the Vajrayana teachings so that it could further adorn the Surangama Sutra, or to further moisten, to further explain the Surangama teaching so that it would be even more adorned. Now, Surangama Sutra is already quite profound, and then on top of that, if we were to add some more of the teachings of looking directly at the nature of mind, then it would be really quite supreme. And then the Buddha said that, why if it came from light, then it would be extinguished when it's dark, and you would not see darkness. If it came from darkness, then it would be extinguished when it is light, and you would not see light. In this way, throughout our history, then we should not be able to see only light or only dark. But that doesn't happen. To give you an example, for example, if you only see light during the day, then one would not see dark in the night, or only see dark throughout the whole day and not see light. If one were to say at that time, I don't just see one single brightness or a single darkness, I see both of them, but that cannot be valid because you see only one thing, and this one thing is existent, and then it has only one characteristic. So if you were to start to build the true causes and conditions, that it will be very complex, and it cannot meet the qualifiers to build such. Therefore, it says that if it comes from darkness, then the brightness will cease, and then if it comes from brightness, then darkness would cease. It may seem to be very confusing, but if you were to delve into it, then there's a profundity in it. It is to say that if you were to see something as an object, then that object has only two possibilities, that is, brightness or darkness. Other than that, it doesn't have any other possibilities. Then you have to make a decision. What is it? And then the Buddha said that suppose it came from the sense organ, from the eyes, which is obviously devoid of light and dark. But that is not true either. Because how could the root, how could the faculty be the seeing nature? When I see the pillar without the light and dark, but I have the eye, then how can I see the pillar? There is no way to see the pillar without darkness and without lightness. A nature of seeing such as this would have no self-nature. Now, by analyzing the subject and object, we will be able to see that this seeing, which is completely different than the seeing nature, it is rather the conventional seeing, is without birth. Is non-arising. Now we've already made the observation of both the object and subject. Let's look at how about the emptiness. Suppose it came forth from emptiness. The Buddha said, when it looks in front of you, it sees the shapes of the defiling dust. When you say that you have the seeing, and this seeing is somewhere, it appears from somewhere in the middle, but that it wouldn't work because then it sees the shapes of defiling dust. Wherever it arises, it would cease to its arising place. And when it turns around, it would see your sense organ. At the time it sees, after it finishes seeing, after it returns, then it would be able to see your eyes. But that doesn't happen, isn't it? Therefore, through this analysis, we know that it doesn't happen. It is not derived from the middle. It is not derived from the space. Moreover, if it were emptiness itself which sees, what connection would that have with your entrance? If you were to say that it is the emptiness that it sees by itself, what does it have anything to do with your own eyes? Then your eyes have no connection to it whatsoever because the space can see. Then what do you need your eyes for? It is just like to say that if we were to use an axe to chop woods, chop the firewoods, if other things, if the space can chop woods, then why do you still need your axe? If you were to be able to write without a pen, if you can use the space to write a pen, then what's the function of your pen? So if the space can see, what's the function of our eyes? Therefore, you should know that the eye entrance is empty and false, since it neither depends upon causes and conditions for existence, nor is spontaneous in nature. The Buddha said that, therefore, Ananda, you should know that your eyes, this entrance of the eyes, indeed is false. It is not existent in causes and conditions, and it is not existent derived from the causes and conditions. It is not derived from spontaneity, and it is not derived from the non-spontaneity. It is simply a conventional concept, but not solidly existent. It is not substantial at all. Therefore, everything is empty. All phenomena is empty. Whenever we think that, oh, I see something with my eyes, but when you truly observe this seeing, do you see it with your eyes? Do you see it with your object? Or do you see it with your eye faculty? Or do you see it through space or with the space? With this kind of analysis, you cannot perceive through the object, nor the subject, that is the eye faculty, nor emptiness. It is simply a delusion. However, the mundane beings constantly speak that I want to see this, I want to see that. They constantly grasp onto those things and then they get confused. Therefore, these kinds of language needs to be stopped, because whenever you make the observation so much in detail, following the guidance of the Buddha, then we would be able to see through our wisdom that there is nothing to be seen. Whatever that you're talking about, whatever seeing you're talking about, if you were to analyze it with your wisdom, are you looking at it through your eyes or through the object or through the gap in the middle, the emptiness? Whenever you analyze in such a way, then people would not be able to answer it. Now, we've already finished the analysis on the eye faculty. Let's look at the next one. Ananda, consider, for example, a person who suddenly stops up his ear with two fingers. Because the sense organ of hearing has become fatigued, a sound is heard in his head. Now, if a person were to stop the ear, were to plug the ears with the two fingers, or if you were to close the ear or cover the ear with the tragus, with the bump that's right beside the ear, whichever way you try to cover your ear for a little period of time, then the hearing has become fatigued and the sound is heard, this wooing sound. It is because the ear faculty is fatigued. You can try for a moment. Did you hear that? The Buddha did not deceive you, right?
佛陀没有骗人吧？那这个呢？
Now, this kind of sound that you can hear in your head is not existent. It is simply a false convention. Isn't that strange? There is no sound at all, but if you were to close your ears in whichever way and then you keep on hearing this sound that is happening in your head, but that is a false conception. That is the false convention. However, both the ears and the fatigue originate in body. The things that we hear with our ear and then the sound that we hear because of fatigue, they both originate from body. The sound that we perceive, whatever they are not existent in the nature of body, rather they're simply the manifestation, the wondrous display of the body or the illusion of body. Why is that? It is because monotony will produce the characteristic of fatigue. Why is that? Because a sense of hearing is stimulated in the midst of two faults. Defiling objects of movement and stillness, defiling appearances are taken in. This is called the nature of hearing. Whenever we listen with our ear faculty, there's either the moving sound or the still sound. According to the Gateway to Knowledge, it is said that there are the two arisings, the arising based on grasping and without grasping. With grasping is the kind of sound such as snapping your finger, because the mind would grasp onto it, and without grasping are the sound that arises such as the four great elements, the earth, water, fire, and wind. And then there are the sound that could demonstrate meaning and the sound doesn't demonstrate meaning. There are different types of different categories of sound. But over here, mainly the Buddha gives the example of the sound, either it is in movement or it is still. When it is still, meaning we can't hear it, and when it's moving, then we can hear it. So the stillness is more similar to the previous example when it talks about the particle of darkness. And stillness is the sound that is too subtle for us to hear, or very subtle that we can barely hear. So these are the two types of dust or particles of sound. By relying on the object, your ear faculty could attach to the characteristic, attach to the sound, this kind of dust. Because of these two causes and conditions, the object and the ear faculty, then the sound, let it be still or in movement, let it be melodious or really terrible sound, or neutral sound. Then one would be able to listen, one would be able to obtain that characteristic of hearing. However, if we were to analyze it, then let the sound be in movement or still, there is no substance to it. I think when we study the Surangama Sutra, you must feel that this is quite profound. I'm not so sure if I'll be able to finish teaching this, but if I can, I'm sure some of you may attain enlightenment, and if you do, please tell me. I myself am not an enlightened one, but if you attain enlightenment, please let me know so that I can give you some kind of reward, like candy.
I'm sure there are people who would come and approach me and tell me that they have attained enlightenment because they have the hidden agenda of wanting to get candy. After the Buddha said that the hearing is ultimately without substance, and then the Buddha started to analyze it. He started to say that, thus, Ananda, you should know that hearing does not come from movement and stillness, nor does it come from the sense organ, nor is it produced from emptiness. How could you hear if the sound or the hearing does not come from the movement or stillness, nor does it come from the sense organs, nor from the emptiness? After we study the Surangama Sutra, we can't see anything, we can't hear anything anymore. Why is that? If it came from stillness, it would be extinguished when there is movement, and you would not hear movement. It is the same train of thought, it is the same line of logic. When you're in a still object, then all the movement sound would be hidden. There would not be any of those movement sound. And vice versa. If it came from movement, then it would be extinguished when there is stillness, and you would not be aware of the stillness. So when there is a movement sound, then you should not be able to hear any of the sound of stillness. This is in terms of the object. If we don't use the term as movement and stillness, whenever we describe the sound as the sound that comes from the object, does it come from the pillar or vase or maybe a drum? Where does the sound come from? If it's from the drum, does it come from the top, the bottom, and the outside, or the inside of the drum? After making this kind of analysis, then we won't be able to find the sound either. And then if you were to further analyze your eye faculty, it is just as stated in the Abhidharma, it says that if the ear faculty is solidly existent, if it has substance, then where does it come from? We won't be able to find it at all. If it is in the middle, if it is between the ear faculty and the drum, there is nothing that can be found. This kind of observation is very similar to the Vajrayana teaching. If you were to say that the hearing comes from my root, then there shouldn't be any of the sound, let it be moving or stillness, but that is not true either. There indeed is a cause and condition. And a nature of hearing such as this would have no self-nature. So the sound that you hear, the nature of it is indeed not existent. After this, then the Buddha said that supposedly it came from emptiness. Emptiness would then become hearing and would no longer be emptiness. If you were to say that the sound or the hearing comes from the emptiness, then emptiness is no longer emptiness anymore. If the hearing doesn't come from my faculty, doesn't come from the object, then if you were to say that the last possibility that comes from the space, that comes from the emptiness, then how could emptiness be empty? Because it starts to have sound in it. That is contradicting to each other. Moreover, if it were emptiness itself which hears, what connection would it have with your entrance, with your ears? If the space can start to hear the sound, then what's the function of your ear? And if the space can hear people without the hearing capacity, without the ability to hear, they would be able to hear as well. So similar to the previous previous one, all the blind ones in the world, they would also be able to perceive all the forms if the space, if the emptiness can see. Therefore, you should know that ear entrance is empty and false, since it neither depends upon causes and conditions for existence, nor is spontaneous in nature. The sound is just completely false. It is not a production of causes and condition. It is not a production of causes and condition. It is neither spontaneous nor not spontaneous. I know that during the study of Surangama Sutra, it is not that easy to understand. But sometimes I think people can rely on their wisdom, and they will be able to delve into the wisdom of the Surangama Sutra. The other day, I watched a short video, and this person in the video shared his experience of reading Surangama Sutra over one night. That was his first time reading the Surangama Sutra. The video is rather short, so I would like to share it with you right now and see if you also share the same experience as he did. The video's overvoice says that back in 2007, it was April the 25th. I started reading the Surangama Sutra in the evening, and when I finally realized the time, it was already 4 a.m. I read the Surangama Sutra overnight, for the whole night. Why was I so drawn to this book? First of all, I have to tell you my background. I studied philosophy. Because of my background, whenever I read anything that doesn't have much logic, I couldn't get less interested. And before I read the Surangama Sutra, I have not much idea about Buddhism. But this particular book, the Surangama Sutra, really drew me into the logic in it because it has the most meticulous logic. Compared to the Surangama Sutra, Immanuel Kant is nobody. George Hegel has no way to compare to what I understood through the Surangama Sutra. That particular feeling is after I've studied a few years for my PhD. When I studied the Western philosophy as my PhD, my training is still not comparable to that of the Surangama Sutra. Therefore, in the early morning when I finally closed the book, I was completely shocked and in awe. Confucius once said that if you were to climb the eastern mountain, then you would be able to see the province as very small and you would be able to see everything. And the eastern mountain is about 800 or 900 meters. Immanuel Kant, we can compare him to about a mountain to 2,000 meters. That's a long way to climb, by the way, if you ever climbed a 2,000 altitude mountain. Then compared to Kant, then Confucius is about 5,000 meters, and Lao Tzu is 7,000. In that way, the Buddha is the highest mountains that we can see in this world, which is the Himalayas. That's 8,800 meters. Did you hear that well? I can't hear it too well. I just remember the 7,000, 2,000, 5,000, and the Mount Everest, which is 8,800. To summarize, he said that he read the Surangama Sutra overnight. And he was quite in awe with the content. We can see this person has quite sharp wisdom. After reading it for only one night, he understood that the wisdom of the Shakyamuni Buddha is the highest compared to all the other philosophers, including Confucius, Lao Tzu, Immanuel Kant, and George Hegel. This is not stated by me. This is stated by him. I'm simply summarizing, right? Let's continue with the last one for today.
Ananda, consider, for example, a person who inhales deeply through his nose. After he has inhaled for a long time, it becomes fatigued, and then there is a sensation of cold in the nose. If a person were to inhale, breathe in, just as whenever we go to a body checkup, the doctor or the nurse would keep on asking you, breathe in, breathe out. Since I do so many checkups, I sometimes dream of the nurse telling me to breathe in, breathe out, relax. But whenever we breathe in for a long period of time, keep breathing in. The nose cannot, the nose doesn't have that cold in there. However, if you were to keep inhaling, then you would feel there's a sensation of coldness. You can give it a try. Especially when you try it again and again and in a quick repetition. This sensation of cold can be felt by everyone if you were to try it. And this kind of sensation is the false convention. In fact, there is no cold in your nose. However, if you were to do that again and again, then you would feel that sensation. So this is the false convention. And then the next one is the right convention. The correct convention, the example of correct convention was not given in the previous two examples, but over here it is. The Buddha then said because of that sensation, there are distinctions of penetration and obstruction, of emptiness and actuality, and so forth, including all fragrant and stinking vapors. Because the nose is without it is of penetration. It is not obstructed. For example, usually our nose would be able to have this hollowness and the air could go in, but whenever we get a cold, our nose would get stuffy and then we won't be able to smell anymore. But through your nose faculty, you can smell the flower fragrance or the foul smell from a toilet. Therefore, the nose would be able to smell the good and the bad, which is considered as the true convention. Compared to the previous example of the coldness sensation, which is the false convention,
就闻到的这些东西啊，就是也就是说这些东西的话呢，就是实际上我们嗅到的这个嗅味是吧？嗅气。
Whatever you smell.
那么这些呢？
Both the nose from the right convention and the fatigue, which is a false convention, originate in body. Because it is no other than the wondrous manifestation of the body, of the true mind. The illusory characteristics is exactly the same to both of the true and false convention. Whatever you smell, or the coldness, the false convention, they're no other than the display of the body. It is no other than this kind of deluded illusion that is manifested. Why would you say that? Because a sense of smelling is stimulated in the midst of the two false, defiling objects of penetration and obstruction. Defiling appearances are taken in. This is called the nature of smelling. Because the penetration and obstruction are the two types of defiling objects. In terms of the object, there are only two possibilities. Either it is
the penetration or of obstruction. According to the gateway to knowledge, it says that in terms of smelling, there are the good smell, bad smell, and the neutral smell. Not too many, just the three types. So those are the characteristics of the defiling dust that's associated to smell. What happens is that these diluted dust, by relying on your root or the faculty, then there is the production of object. By relying on the object, there is the production of root. And by relying on the root that's taking into the dust, which is the object, then there is the smelling. So let it be good or bad or foul or fragrant things that you smell, whatever kinds of sensation you can feel in your faculty. In the convention, yes, there are the false ones and there are the true ones, but the penetration or obstruction is without any substance. So in the sutra it says, apart from the two defiling objects of penetration and obstruction, the smelling is ultimately without substance. You should know that smelling does not come from penetration and obstruction, nor does it come from the sense organ, nor is it produced from emptiness. Why? If it came from penetration, the smelling would be extinguished when there is obstruction. Right at the moment when there is obstruction, then the penetration would be gone, and then when there is penetration, when there's obstruction, and then there is penetration, the penetration would be gone. Just like when we talk about the eyes seeing the dark dust and the light dust, it is the same, follows the same logic. If it existed because of obstruction, then there is penetration. Then when there is penetration, there would be no smelling. In that case, how would the awareness of fragrance, stench, and other such sensations come into being? When there is obstruction, then there's no way to have any penetration. And then how could you say that there are the existence of fragrance and stench? But if you were to say that the obstruction is there, there is no penetration, then whenever we smell, for example, a fragrant flower or something really stinky, your object, which is obstruction, since your object is obstruction, then where does the fragrance and stench come from? Suppose it came from the sense organ, which is obviously devoid of penetration and obstruction. A nature of smelling such as this would have no self-nature. Now we've already made the observation of the object and subject and also a short summary. And then the Buddha continued to say that suppose it came from emptiness, smelling it itself would turn around and smell your own nose. If it is from the emptiness, if the space can smell, then the space would be able to smell the nose. Let the space smell whether the nose smells good or not. Moreover, if it were emptiness itself which smelled, what connection would it have with your entrance, with your nose? Therefore, you should know that the nose entrance is empty and false, since it neither depends upon causes and conditions for existence, nor is spontaneous in nature. Whatever we smell, let it be the right or the false convention, they are simply false.
And the nose entrance is empty and false, since it neither depends upon causes and conditions. There neither a production of spontaneous in nature nor not spontaneous in nature. In this way, we would be able to see that all phenomena is just like space. Whatever that we see, whatever we hear, whatever we smell, we would understand the nature of it, and then we won't grasp onto good food, good music, and good things to watch. After this, you would understand why the Buddha said that there is no eye, no ear, no nose, no body. This is the reason. It is not to say that we don't have nose and body on our face, but it is saying that there's no substance to it. Now we'll stop here today.